Hey everybody, welcome to the FreeMind Podcast, the realest thing on the internet. There are no scripts, there are no agendas, there are no pre-session dinners. This is just two human beings connecting for the first time in real time on camera. Today we're joined by Tom Dusenberry, an absolute legend in the gaming industry. We explore the incredible journey that he has taken and some of the secrets behind making the games that we all truly love and the ways in which to create a true fan and an authentic experience through fun. Let's check out Tom's story.
Yeah, my name is Tom Dusenberry. My company is Dusenberry Entertainment. It was founded in 2001.
Excellent. Tom, I'm gonna just jump right into where I was kind of going before we hit record button. I'm 38 years old. I'm exactly your target demographic. I've grown up with the products that you've taken to market, that you've licensed, that you've distributed, and there's a lot of people that are in the names and people know, but there's not a lot of people that are the behind the scenes that make things happen, to make those products accessible, to get them to market. Talk to me a little bit about how that started with you, because it's not just a recent revelation for you. As I said, it's my entire living has been the product of your stuff, and many of our listeners are products of the 80s and 90s as well. That probably your name is not a name that they might not have heard of. I want to know your story. So tell me a little bit about what it is you do. I know that's a loaded question, but you can feel free to go as deep or as shallow as you want on that.
Yeah, I was very fortunate from a point of view that when I got out of high school, I really didn't have an opportunity to go to college. But one of my friend's mother worked at a game company called Parker Brother Games. And so I literally, Nate, started on the loading dock of Parker Brother Games. And 22 years later, I was the president of the company. So it was a huge, fascinating experience. And what I learned was that the harder I worked, the luckier I got. So I really have a complete commitment to hard work, and I really enjoy that. And it's kind of the core of what I do. But equally important was the fact that the games business was beginning to transition. And I always joke about the fact that the first platform transition I went from board games to plastic. And as funny as that sounds, it really was an amazing breakthrough from a game point of view, because it brought a third dimension into the game. So it was great. And from that, I learned every single process within manufacturing. I understood distribution of product extremely well. And then I was able to move from marketing to sales and product development. So I had all the core parts of the business that I understood intimately and had some success and some experience with. So to me, that's really where the genesis of my opportunity was, and I really took full advantage of that. And what I realized was that there's only one thing that matters in the game industry, and that is it's all about the fun. And if you can deliver a fun experience, people will want to come back and they want to play it again and again. And so I really dedicated my career towards that one focus, and that is it's all about the fun. So whether it was in the big corporations or whether it's an independent entrepreneur, my focus always goes back to that one core principle. And I think that that's really what separated us from a lot of other companies, from a point of view that they were looking at their distribution strength, and they were looking at, what their capabilities were to be able to have unique marketing. What we were doing was delivering excellent product and always focusing on that. And so, the first thing that really happened for me was that when I started to go into CD-ROMs, I recognized a change in the marketplace, and that was that Windows 95 came along, and all of a sudden dimensionality came into the computer. So there could be graphics and there could be enhanced audio, and we really took advantage of that. And so, but the first thing we did is we went out and hired the very best game studio in the entire world, Westwood Studios and Virgin Games, to make Monopoly. And everybody said, wow, that's just, you don't really need to do that kind of a thing. You can just make a 2D game and flip it into CD-ROM. But what we did is we allowed imagination to take place. And the developers at Westwood Studios created a product that really kind of created a standard for Hasbro Interactive, from a point of view that every other product had to live up to that quality. And that goes back to it's all about the fun. So that's really where my entire focus has been in my entire career. And from that, I've been blessed to be able to work on Star Wars and Roller Coaster Tycoon and Frogger and NASCAR and all these other great brands, all going back to focusing on what the consumer experience is and how much fun it could be.
I find it fascinating too when I interview people like yourself that have been through for a long time. You know, myself, I'm 25 years into my industry as well, and you get to that reflection point at the 20 years and the 25 years. Every couple 5 years, you reflect. When looking back, I'm so impressed by people like yourself that there's a lot of times we as humans get stagnant in our jobs and we just do the same job forever. A job like in the gaming industry, and you're in the front end of everything. You have to make sure you have to see ahead of what's already changing on a daily. I mean, it used to be a little slower, but now obviously it's changing daily and hourly. How have you found the ways that you're able to stay ahead of the trends, and also creating trends as well with your knowledge of what's going on and understanding that consumer and what drives their joy?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to stay relevant. And so what that means is that you have to be open to new ways of doing things, and you have to be open to new types of suggestions on how you can make appeal happen. And so for me, it's an ongoing effort of education from a point of view of what the multimedia market is and how it pertains to games, and then what the trends are from a point of view of what's happening in the marketplace, and can you change those paradigms to be able to make other types of experiences happen. So, I do agree that, if you are in a career, you have to be enthusiastic about working and being in the career, no matter if you're 20 years old or you're 60 years old. And for me, what I try to do is I always try to maintain the passion. So like right now, I'm more excited about the game business and my personal involvement in it right now than I've ever been in my past. And I think that, I work hard to be able to be in that type of a position, to be able to think about that from my perspective and maybe offer something that can be very significant in the marketplace in the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely phenomenal. And one thing too, like, it's the one thing to create a game, but in your position, you're creating the game, you're distributing, you're branding, you're partnering, you're working with the sponsors. Talk a little bit about a game at scale, like a NASCAR heat or anything like that, where you're working with major corporations while also developing your game, and how that essentially that tightrope balance of the customer relationship management while also with your brand packaging management as well.
Yeah, so that was a unique and interesting experience because NASCAR video game business had fallen on very hard times, and so it was a question of being able to come back into the marketplace. And the reason that EA and Take-Two and the other big sport and video game companies were not going after NASCAR was that the audience was declining, and it was going to take a big investment to be able to get something back, and where there was a question on the return or not. So for us, what we did was that we went in and said we need to deliver quality products, so that we found Monster Games out in Minnesota. And they have a long history in racing. The physics that they have are very good. And so we felt we could deliver a really high quality type of a product into the marketplace. That would evolve with time, and as the systems evolved as well. So that was kind of the core. But then what we knew we needed to do is we needed to integrate as much as possible. So we literally built our business in the NASCAR headquarters building in Charlotte, so that we were an elevator ride away from all the executives within NASCAR. And that was a huge leap forward from a point of view that they started to embrace us and started to recognize us as a value add to them. But then equally important is that we did this huge outreach to the teams and to the drivers, and got them involved at one level or another, and made it really kind of like a something special that they were in the game. And so package covers and things like that became very important. So that was really what we did, is we kind of created this massive partnership type situation, because we knew that we were going to have a really broad audience. And then we brought it all together because we then did a partnership with NBC, which NBC Sports did the NASCAR business. So we were literally taking our digital assets from the video game, transferring those into broadcast assets, so that they could highlight and feature what the story was on the race itself. And so that became a fully integrated type of a marketing program. So we found other ways to be able to reach the specific consumer we were going for, and able to find a way to make money off of that big niche, and then be able to grow that into a bigger profit.
How do you see the difference in obviously the technology that exists today changes everything in the digital world as far as how we consume and how we distribute content and data and communications. What are some of the things that have kind of disappeared in gaming that maybe you felt like could have stayed around, but for whatever reason they didn't? Or do you feel like everything that's kind of filtered through has filled its role and moved on?
Well, I think that, it seems to me what has happened is that the game business has always had a propensity to be able to add on to itself. And so, it really started out with like casual type games. So it was Monopoly and it was Mario and stuff like that. And then, all of a sudden it started to identify more of a shooter type of a market, right? And then all of a sudden there was an adult market with Grand Theft Auto. And then there became like a competitive market with esports. So what I always see is the reason that the game business is now close to a $200 billion business is the fact that there are so many different segments to it and so many different platforms to be able to put your games onto. There's almost a game for every person. It's just what they have to be able to find the platform in the game to be able to enjoy it.
Taking your earlier days of when, and this is my childhood, when you took the board games and converted them into the screen and the keyboard for us and the joysticks and the controllers, you changed our world. You changed everything in how we understood things. You changed how we learned things. And that was one of the things you pioneered. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how standing against that adversity, because while we look back and we can say easily, oh, that all makes sense. I know as a much smaller scale, and anybody else knows that has done something against the grain or done something, that wasn't exactly a smooth transition behind the scenes. So kind of talk a little bit about that adversity and kind of pushing forward for something you knew was valuable and obviously proved to be so.
Yeah, it was the challenge that we always had and we always have is to deliver the unexpected, right? And so, if you just say, okay, geez, Monopoly's on a video game, it's like, okay, the 2D board games have flipped over and all of a sudden you can go around and around. But what can you make it special? How can you add videos and how can you add, graphic animation and stuff like that really spices it up a little bit. And to me, every game needed to have its special flavor to it if it was going to be brought into the marketplace. So a good example of that was that we wanted to do Yahtzee, a classic type of a dice game, but we wanted to do it on CD-ROM. And interestingly enough, the guy that I'm going to talk about now is Chris Down, who's the chief design officer at Mattel, and he's got a huge responsibility. But the time I'm talking about was that he was a 24-year-old guy just out of college, and his job was to try to develop the dice game Yahtzee. And so, if you really looked at Yahtzee, the vicarious thrill is that you're shaking that cup and then you drop it and your dice roll out, right? So how could you replicate that in the game? And so Chris came up with this clever idea that when you hold your mouse, you could shake your mouse, and on the screen, that all of a sudden the cup would replicate, and when you hit it, it would spill down. So it gave that one-on-one type of experience from one to the other, and that made Yahtzee a special game from a point of view of CD-ROM. So that was, just one example of how you had to take something that people already have a preconceived notion on and then take it to the next level. Interestingly enough, just to stay with Chris Down, later I assigned him the responsibility to take Frogger, a classic arcade game, and to bring it into CD-ROM and more importantly, to PlayStation 1. And what Chris did was he interpreted the first two games was exactly what we know and love Frogger to be, and how you have to get across the river and how you have to get across the highway. He then took it and did 78 additional levels where we had all kinds of obstacles and things that we had to go through. And that turned out to be, I think we sold 14 million units of Frogger. So, right. So, it just goes to show, imagination, and bringing that designer in and having them, really try to stretch the limits. All of a sudden you can have successful games come into the market.
And I love that you brought up the Yahtzee, because that's something that is my entire life as well is the physical form in my family, and it's still to this day. Just in the past 6 to 12 months, it's a iconic thing for us. It also, I remember, and I forgot about that, and I'm so glad how you did bring that up, because as soon as you said it, I remembered the dice going and everything on my mouse. And to give that sensory experience, and talk a little bit about, from a marketing perspective, more generally speaking, how the sensory and adapting sensory into the experience with your customers can apply that more tangible loyalty and kind of relationship with your customer.
Yeah. So in today's game market, you have a one-on-one relationship with the customer. So you're able to engage with them with new graphics and new levels and things like that. And that becomes absolutely critical to what the game business is today. And so, from a game marketer's perspective, what they have to do is, one, they have to really be focused on making sure that their designers are giving them a quality product that has fun experience. The second thing that the designer has to do is they have to give them something that makes the person that they can get in to stay longer. So today's marketing person has to, one, find an audience, which is really hard, and that's why they go to brands and things like that, because there's a natural way to be able to transfer over. But if you do get somebody to try the game, the most important thing to do is to try to retain them for as long as possible. And that's where the marketing hooks become central from a point of view of what you can do in game to keep them going, but also to make a bigger aura from a point of view that, hey, I'm deeper than you are in the game, so I'm doing pretty good here, and I want to continue to do that. And that if you do start to build that, your audience will get bigger, your community will get bigger, and all the payoffs, both from in-game and advertising, will pay off for you in a significant way.
Give me a peek behind the curtain from the day when we went from everybody had to go to each other's houses to play games to the world being like the games now, like we can play with somebody in San Francisco and Baltimore, Maryland, and simultaneously, like on the back end from running your business. I can't even imagine what that whiteboard session was immediately.
It was really tough from a point of view of experience, right? Because you had latency issues and you had those types of things. But it was also really tough from a point of view of consumer security. And that is, did you have balance of play so you didn't have pedophiles in there playing with kids and stuff like that? So to me, I think the industry did a really good job. And there were some holes and we did make some mistakes and things like that. But I do think overall, the transition from singular play type experience to massively multiplayer type gaming experience to now, having a group of 5 or 6 people that like to enjoy each other is kind of central to being able to really have a fun experience in games. Was a long, hard process that I think that took some time for us to be able to sort out all those different issues. But ultimately, then a consumer got the best benefit because now they get to play with other people and they get to compete and they get to compare themselves, and that builds communities, and those communities are where friendships come from for a lifetime.
Absolutely. When you taking Trivial Pursuit, for example. This is me not knowing, was that already part of like Disney and everything like that prior, or did it come in a connection when the game transcended certain channels?
Trivial Pursuit?
Yeah.
Well, Trivial Pursuit was an interesting phenomenon from a point of view that the inventors invented the game and they couldn't get any big game companies to be able to buy it. And so Shell and Ryder bought it on a whim, and then it took off. And when it took off to the point that I think it sold 75 million units in a 2-year period of time. So it was really like society transformational type stuff. So then what happened was that the rights were transferred to Parker Brothers, and I got involved with Trivial Pursuit. And it was one of the great experiences of my lifetime, because during that time, we built a TV game show that was successful for 6 years. We did the first CD-ROM games. We took it into consumer marketing with General Mills. And so to me, it was a great way to really fully exploit a game into a game brand. And, I think that was a great extension of that. And from it, what we also learned was that trivia is great, but it can get very niche very quickly. And what we learned was that the first game and the second game were by far the most popular games because they were the most general knowledge-based games, and they were the ones that most people could get 1 out of 2 right, and they loved to play it. When you started to get into specific areas like Trivia Pursuit for the 60s, all of a sudden, for a certain set of people, it was good, but for the broad audiences, they just couldn't comprehend that. And so, that was another learning lesson, was don't go too wide in all your new SKUs and stuff like that. Stay focused on where all the consumers can enjoy the same type of experience.
I had one, anything with movies and DVDs, I was the king. So I was very much, that's what I wanted to play all the time. And I'm being sarcastic when I say this, because I learned very quickly how people did not watch as deeply the movies and TV. So I quickly didn't have friends to play with after a while. And I appreciate you bringing that up, that we only play the games that we can at least hit a 50% success rate.
Well, the art form of Trivial Pursuit was the gift of the 2 inventors. And what I mean by that is that they just didn't throw questions and answers out. What they did was they debated, they argued, and they worked hard on how they wrote their questions. And that's what I think caught the imagination of everybody, was the fact that there was like a hint in the question, and it was very uniquely written. And to me, that there was an elegance to that that is kind of missing today, because now you just get a trivia writer and he writes it out and you send it into the marketplace. So I do believe, from a fun point of view, that, art and knowledge has to kind of come together, and they have to mesh together in a way that's more than just making it a quiz.
And that's exactly what I mean, is like today we do a lot of things. We'll go to Quizzo at a bar, we'll go to trivia night somewhere, but it's like somebody, pulled it out of a generation site or anything like that. But at that time, there was none of that was around. So these were really developed thoughtfully, done with intention. Every single question that went in there was done with intention. And whether or not that's done today, we beg to differ sometimes with the mass consumption of what content can go inside of those cards, where we didn't have as much content that we could have put in as well, in addition to all that. So like, with that said, the world is so much different, and the consumers are different and the businesses are different. This is a very loaded question, but I want to ask it. Like, what advice, in non-polished, stuff like this, what advice for somebody that either wants to be a creator in the gaming industry, a salesman in the game industry, a brander, all those different areas, are there any core traits that person would have to have for that? And what are the unique traits of somebody to be successful in your industry, regardless of position?
Well, I think that you have to have passion. I mean, and I think you have to have conviction, and you have to be willing to be told no many times. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. But we do 3,000 games, of which 30 are successful. So there's a lot of sob stories out there as it relates to how games work and don't work. So you have to be very careful about that. And but I also think that you kind of have to be true to yourself, and that is that, do you really have something that's really good or not? And then you also kind of have to look at your circumstance, and that is that if you have 5 kids at home and you're responsible for getting those 5 kids through, to take a risk and try to become an entrepreneur is probably not the wisest thing in the world to do. Maybe a little later in your career, it could be wise for you to do that, because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where your entrepreneurship didn't work out, and all of a sudden you've got huge issues from a home point of view as well. So I don't think that getting into the business is for the faint of heart. I think that the game industry is very unique versus many other industries, because every year there's a brand new product all the time. So your hits and misses come very quickly. Some people like that, some don't. If you're going to be a designer, you better be really good, and you better be able to be willing to really show that you've worked out your product and there's no endless loops in your play design and stuff like that. If you want to be a salesperson, identify a company and target them to the point of finding out what job descriptions are, and then make sure you've got the qualifications for those job descriptions. The likelihood of getting hired is probably pretty high at that point.
With all the technological advancements that have happened, going from the board games all the way to the current digital space, in addition to that, when we're talking about the sensory experiences, going back to that topic, with artificial realities and virtual realities and augmented and everything like that, how do you see that? Do you see that as a full takeover, or do you see it as a like a side channel and still having dual applications for the games that we have today?
I think that the future is virtual reality and augmented reality. So I'm very excited about that. I think we have a long way to go from a technology point of view. We've got to get it down to the point it's just a pair of glasses, and you can see through it and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that the Apple Vision Pro is a huge leap forward from a point of view of what the possibilities are. So I'm kind of excited about that. And to answer your question, I think that virtual reality will serve an important role in the game business, but there won't take place of video games, PC games, and mobile games.
When you guys are now with doing that in the distribution aspects between iOS, Android, all the different platforms, how do you guys is it a multiple team for each type of thing, or how does that get deployed to where everything runs successfully and smoothly across all the different platforms? Because it's the days of creating one CD-ROM. I mean, now you have to create. Do you really have to create different versions of the? I'm being ignorant to the behind the scenes. When you're applying, do you have to put different versions of the game on each one?
Yeah, it's so most game developers will focus on one specific genre and one specific platform. So they're video game developers or PC developers or mobile developers. If the initiative is to go across all those different platforms, there's the Unreal Engine from Epic, and there's also Unity, and those are kind of like their platforms that would be able to go across multiple different platforms. So like when we did the NASCAR Heat game, we used Unity because of the fact that we were going across 5 platforms. And it worked quite well for us to be able to take, the very sophisticated PC and video game type animation and transfer it into a video mobile format.
For you specifically, not about in gaming industry or anything like that, how do you feel like different lessons or people or anything like that in your life have influenced your leadership style as well as your ambitions?
Yeah, I've been blessed with many mentors, and I do think that I'm kind of like an observational type of a learner, and so I really pay a lot of attention to people that impact my life, and I try to evaluate what they're good at and what they're not so good at. Try to emphasize the good and try to learn that, make sure that I don't do the bad similar to what they do.
When the bringing the as a licensing agent, talk a little bit about that. I think that's a role that most people don't realize. I mean, people in the gaming world know it, and it's in a lot of industries. But talk a little bit about what that role is and how crucial it is for the distribution of these products.
Yeah, so I serve as a licensing agent, and so generally what it means is that you have a concept and you have an idea that is probably ready to be purchased or licensed by a bigger company, and then they take it and bring it to the marketplace. So as a product licensing agent, my job is to work with you to get the product to the position that it will be received as good as possible, and then to do the proper negotiation with the company to get it to the point that they would then be willing to license it. So, in that type of a circumstance, let's say that you've got a board game. Generally, what we would do is we would work together and put together a PowerPoint presentation, and we would put together like a little video that shows the features of the game. And then the advantage of a product licensing agent such as myself is that you can go to any toy company right now and you can submit a product because they just let anybody do it. But you're going to be one of probably 2,000 people. But then in addition to that, they have certified vetted inventors and inventor agents. And there's, like in Mattel as an example, I think they have 70. So if you're one of those, then what happens is you don't have to go through confidentiality, and because you're already vetted and you're protected on that. And because of the fact that I've got a long-term experience, I have direct access to to who the executives are that are making the decision to make sure that we get a strong, solid pitch for an opportunity to get into the line. So that's kind of the role that we play. It's a pretty standard type deal from a point of view that you keep 80% and I get 20%, and that's kind of just what I've done for years, and that seems to be fair for everybody, and they like that. Versus a lot of I know agents do 50-50 or even 80-20 the other way. So I'm not motivated to do that as much as I am to try to get product into the marketplace and make it successful for both of us. So
one of those things that with the back to the NASCAR heat and EO sports. Or esports, excuse me. When you're writing that business plan and going into that new venture and that initiative, what are some of the let's say some concerns as well as some things that you're trying to fix to meet any gaps?
So from a business plan point of view, it's like, what's the market, right? And so that's really important. And in the example that I was dealing with back in the 2000s, beginning of the century, NASCAR had an audience of 75 million people. Now it's all of a sudden 2016, and they have an audience of maybe 7,500,000 people. So that was the first issue that really needed to be dealt with. And that's kind of hard because you're trying to live off of other numbers and things like that. And so that was like a hurdle to get past. And what the implications of that is in advances, guarantees, royalty rates, and things like that. So that was a big factor from a business planning perspective. And then the question became is that how much investment do you need from a development point of view to be able to get to the marketplace, to be able to get some returns back so that you can continue to develop the product. And so that was a big initiative as well that we really had to try to work through as it relates to what the expenditures were. And then the issue really came down to that if we were going to pay licensing fee to get the license, and we were going to pay a lot of money to be able to get the development, what's left for marketing and what's left from a profitability perspective. And that's where we had to really go completely out of the box and to try to think of an integration into something that was very meaningful and very targeted towards that audience, which was broadcast. And that helped us a ton. And so, there was a lot of strategic factors that had to kind of work through to get to the point of saying, okay, this is a viable business that we should probably invest in and pursue.
Yeah, you don't think about it when you're living that life, when you're not in it. But you know that the surge in the audience of NASCAR was really insane. And I had to ask that question because it's like I also want to know, like, I also was wondering, like, as far as the how you forecast. A lot of things, a lot of people joke around, we talk about the crystal ball. I think you might have had the ultimate crystal ball in trying to figure out how to forecast something that is exploding the way it's exploding without being too optimistic that you ride that trend for too long, while also being realistic to not over invest. Like, that balance just seems so complicated, and kind of like give me a little peek on what those talk conversations were like.
Well, you know, I can tell you two stories. One was in the 1990s with Hasbro Interactive. We caught NASCAR when it was at its absolute peak, and we were skyrocketed that. And then there was 15 years later about trying to deal with a wounded sport at that point. And you know, to me, you know, the difference really was the fact that the fan base was so into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of easy to be able to market from a point of view that we took the hottest driver at the time, who was Bobby Labonte, and we made him our spokesperson. And what he did was he became like a technical advisor as well. So he had this great authority from a point of view when he was talking to the NASCAR base, that, you know, he was in there helping the designers work out the product. He did the commercial for it. He was the spokesperson for us. And I think that was very compelling, because that year he won the championship. So, I mean, it was like, wow, were we lucky to pick the right guy to be able to do that. So then we go forward into 15 years later. We picked Brad Keselowski, who happened to win the championship, and Joey Logano, who happened to pick the championship as well. But the audience was so diminished at that point, and it seemed like it was more fragmented, that if you brought Brad Keselowski out, if you were a Kevin Harvick fan or if you were a Tony Stewart fan, you didn't like Brad. And so, you know, there was a negative to the game. And so then it became more of an issue of, like, you know, you had to get all the drivers involved, because they all became little niches that you kind of had to support.
Yeah, like each driver has its own brand, and they all have their own audience and stuff like that. So I don't want to, like, I was just having a conversation the other day with somebody about, like, with the WWE and WWF, how, like, each character had its little following behind it, and it's each community, and it's still the same way today. And with that, I guess, how have from your positioning in the market there's two things that happen now directly with the consumers with today, is, like, not only they play the game, they can play the game with each other, they can play it in real time in the car, in the train, whatever, but also that direct communication to those people. Like, there's a chance that because of the game, somebody could send a direct message to Brad and then say, hey, listen, blah, 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 and then Brad could communicate back. How does that function into your strategic planning for those games with looking at the marketing?
Yeah, like with NASCAR Heat, we were the first people within NASCAR to use streaming, and we connected with Twitch. And so we set up a little studio within our office where the drivers could come in, they could play NASCAR Heat with my son, who was the sponsorship guy, and they would talk about the game. And then, of course, the driver would be driving his car and that type of stuff. And it worked out really good, because what it did is it created a following, and the following could then start asking questions to, you know, the driver and say, you know, what are you doing? And then there would be direct feedback. But it also became really special because all the drivers wanted to do it. And the reason they did was that it became the easiest personal appearance gig ever. And that was, they got to go in and play a video game in a comfort of sitting on a couch talking about the game, and they got full credit for you know, doing their marketing and their sponsorship stuff. So we found that the drivers were, like, calling us up saying, hey, you know, you got any openings where we can come in and do something? So to me, I think that it really was the beginning of deep fan engagement from a point of view of personalization. You know, if you wanted to speak with Kevin Harvick or Denny Hamlin, I mean, you just go, like, play the game, and then they would be right there for you.
It's amazing to compare. Like, my dad and I have talked about this quite a bit, the differences in our childhood and things like that. And I think it's access is the difference in mine and his. Like, I have had access most of my life to those people, whether or not they answer or not, that's one thing. But the opportunity and the chance of them seeing my communications is just night and day from what my dad had. So I appreciate everything that I think about that you've touched in your career has all been very progressive in the sense that your speed and your accuracy. And with that, I know you've had some failures and stuff like that. I don't know specifically what they are, but I can't imagine you have 100% success rate. So with that part, I've been a brand manager before in a wholesalership, and we had, litmus tests and Mendoza lines and things like that. What are some of the criteria you look at as far as who you want to partner with? Obviously, because now you can be more discernible than you were early. I mean, if you don't have to, you have an established credibility. I mean, people are coming to you now, and that's a good thing. So how do you choose who you're going to work with when honestly so many opportunities could be there and you're not taking all of them? So how do you strategically choose that?
Yeah, I try to keep an open mind on everything that I see, and I probably turn down 90% of the things that I see. So and not that they couldn't be good, and not that they're good, great, but they're just not for me, and I can't contribute at the level I need to contribute at. So that's probably the first criteria is that you have something that is marketable, right? So can I license it? Can I sell it? Can I get it into a better place? But probably equally important is that if you're an asshole, I probably don't want to work with you. I mean, just to be quite upfront with you, because it's just too much pain for both of us. And so I like to collaborate. You kind of know what the deal is. I know what the deal is. So there's not any other things that you have to worry about and stuff like that. And I'm trying to, be aligned with you to make this product successful. So there are times that we have to ask some really hard questions, but we need to be sensitive as it relates to how we ask those questions and how we get the answers back, because life goes on, And to me, if you do have a really good idea and you're really enthusiastic about it and you're a pretty good person, we could probably be good partners.
We talked a good bit about the gaming aspect. Let's talk about another aspect in not necessarily merchandise, because it's also part of the gaming, but like the toys and robots and things like that. Talk a little bit about the tangible physical aspects of the industry today. How do you look at them? Are they part of the game, or are they kind of the marketing? How do you label them, I guess?
No, I'm a big fan of smart toys, and we really kind of invented that category back at Hasbro Interactive when we did the CD-ROM play sets with Star Wars and with Tonka, and so I've always been a big proponent of that. Even when I was at NASCAR, we were looking at physical, die-cast cars that we were going to be able to make integrated into the computer and stuff like that. And right now I can't divulge exactly what I'm doing from a project point of view, but the project definitely has physical and digital products associated with it. So I continue to be involved in that area. And the reason for it is that I think that it's an extension of the fun experience, most importantly, but it's also a good way from a monetization perspective. A lot of times you might not be able to monetize your software, but because you have physical product that goes with it, all of a sudden there's a true value on a one-on-one relationship back and forth.
I think also like it brings that tangible piece that I don't think we should ever lose. As digital as we get, there still is that, that sensory experience that we need to have, and that tangible thing. And I think I look at my kids today and the toys and stuff like that. They're not just toys. They're they're representations of themselves. Like they display them in their room, certain ones and things like that. So I think I personally, my opinion is exactly what you said, and even more. I think that it becomes, those toys and those tangible objects become a representation of the individual, and that emotion when you enter someone's home in that fashion is so intimate and amazing, and just a testament to the loyalty of the brand.
Right. And I do think I agree with you that, to me, in today's world, customization and personalization is very important for your product. And it's also it's a big identifier. I remember when my son was first going to college, he was really worried about who his roommate was going to be. And so he goes to High Point University in North Carolina, and he is a NASCAR fan. And he goes in, and the first thing that he sees that his new roommate has is a Tony Stewart hat. And they're still friends today, right? Because they had a natural bonding through that brand, and that they both, understood and liked racing. And from that, they all of a sudden became friends.
So you mentioned your son was on Twitch for the marketing and things like that. Talk through that a little bit. Was that what age is he at that point that he was participating in that?
Well, he was he was probably between 25 and 30 at the time. And it was the very first time that we did the first Twitch piece. We actually went to the Daytona International Speedway, and it was a July race, and we took one of the suites upstairs, and we had the drivers come through, and so that they were doing demoing, and it was being broadcast out to the audience. So that's really began. But because it was successful there, we said, why don't we just build a studio within the company and to be able to do that. And so that's where we did it. And then it was like a place where the drivers could go, and they could play video games and hang out and feel pretty comfortable, but they could also do their personal appearance type stuff. So it was a really positive experience for everybody.
With social media affecting so much about consumers' trends and what role does social media play with Dusenberry Entertainment? How much of a role are you representing yourselves, or are you playing a role in representing the brands that you represent?
So for me, from a social media point of view, my total focus is on LinkedIn because that's where all my business contacts are, and I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been very good for me, and it keeps me very well connected, and I get access to people I wouldn't normally get access to. As it relates to my businesses, every business has to have a social media component to it. And so, there has to be either a spokesperson that's trying to make engagement, or there has to be trying to get product into the hands of podcasters so that they can get the message out. And so to me, streaming and social media kind of go hand in hand from a point of view of they're central to marketing right
now. I just want to thank you again. I want to thank you so much for taking the time today. I've learned so much from behind the scenes, as well as I just appreciate being able to have the opportunity, like we talked about, access to be able to directly say to you and appreciate the work that you've done in your life. And I can speak for many people. I am so excited to release this out to the world and get names like yourself out there where people can see what goes on behind the scenes, more so than what, distractions of that thing, and the power that exists that. And also for a lot of people to realize that there are so many facets to every industry, and especially like to be in the gaming world, you don't just have to be a creator of games or a developer. There's a million other aspects that you can do if you have a passion for gaming. So with that said, one last question for you would be, like, what opportunities, without giving any of your secret sauce that you're working on, what opportunities do you see in the future as the evolution of the gaming and consumer engagement world?
Yeah, the industry is going through an interesting transition right now, and that is that we see that the hardware platforms are getting rather old, and so we need an update there. And so I think there's anticipation of that. And then I also think that we're going to go through probably the biggest paradigm change we've ever been through in the games business, and that is that everything's going to be streaming. And from a streaming business, it creates subscription opportunities and advertising opportunities, and it creates all these direct-to-consumer type of experiences. So if you were to get in the game industry right now, if you're good at math, by a programming angle or animation and stuff like that, and if you are really good at like business development, there are huge key jobs from a business development perspective. And then probably where there's most of the jobs is in consumer interaction, dealing with the customer and retaining that customer to build new programs and new ways to be able to keep them. And so, to me, the gaming industry is going to see a lot of new jobs in the next 5 to 10 years, and they're going to be in really exciting, really compelling areas that really lead you directly to delivering a consumer experience that's fun. And if it is, you're going to get great immediate feedback from your consumers and be able to build on that.
Well, Tom, I'll say it a 20th time. Thank you again so much. I can't say it enough, because one of the reasons is for yourself. I know you have a lot of people that want to talk to you. Secondly, I have a very unique podcast, and not a lot of people are comfortable without doing prep, without going to dinner prior, without getting questions prior, and knowing to come into something completely blind. And I really appreciate that. It's a true testament to your personality. It reflects everything we just talked about, is that you are just not afraid and strategic and open. And I really want to thank you for being one of those types of people. And I look forward. I hope that this isn't the last conversation we have. I'm sure it won't be. I really enjoyed the time with you.
Well, thank you, Nate. And if I can finish, just one thing is that being out of the box and trying to do new things is that today I'm using a brand new camera and a brand new design, and I had never experienced it before, and all of a sudden it came on, and this is what I got, and I said, because it's Nate, I'm going to go with it. So, I don't know what this is going to look like to your fans, but this is my new Bang & Olufsen, and this is what I get.
I think if I'm going to extract a quote card out of my favorite one, might be, it's Nate, I'm going to go with it.
Well, thank you,
Tom,
Nate.
Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day. You take care.
Thank you.